what Trump wants is those high-end jobs back in America, and highly profitable firms like Apple to start building iPhone factories in China. So, suddenly saying, we're not going to do tariffs on iPhones, but we are still on textiles, doesn't make a lot of sense. So that was billed as by some of Trump's advisors as holding out a hand to China, realizing that they'd maybe pushed China too far and that it couldn't come and ask for a deal for without losing face. So maybe that is a way back in, but China's being pretty hard-lined at the moment. It hasn't shown any sign of responding to that, partly because the policy is so unpredictable that it doesn't really know what to say.
In so many of the stories we've been discussing on the programme this morning, the influence of China is key. The UK government is taking control of the British steel plant in Scunthorpe that a Chinese company was trying to close. China's also fighting a multifaceted trade war with the United States. As the UK government signals that China is no longer welcome in Britain's steel sector, questions are now being asked as to whether Beijing was deliberately trying to undermine the industry. Richard Spencer is the China correspondent at The Times and joins us now. Good morning.
Good morning.
Shall we take stock of what's happened in Scunthorpe first? Because we've heard this morning from the Minister no guarantees at the moment about what will happen there, about whether that coke will be delivered and the plant will stay open. But we also heard from the Times, Sunday Times industry correspondent who was suggesting that Jingye is actually not potentially as solid a company as we might expect. How big is it in China?
Yeah, it's not one of the top-ranking Chinese steel firms by any means. I was looking yesterday. I think it ranks about number 15 in terms of steel production. Now, you're working in a country which is by far and away the world's biggest steel producer. I don't think we have a 15th biggest steel producer in this country, but. So it's not a national level key company for China. I mean, China has these sort of massive world-beating companies now in lots of fields, and Jingye is definitely not one of them. Still, it's a substantial producer of steel even in China. I think the idea that the Chinese government is putting a lot of energy into this issue is probably, if that's what the minister is getting at, I think is probably a bit overdone. But it is, it's all these things are political and of interest. So it's not a world-beating company for sure.
Let's get into that question a bit more, because we were speaking to the minister this morning and he was suggesting he wouldn't go there talking about whether this is a sabotage attempt by the Chinese company. Others have suggested that there definitely is a political element to this. How accurate do you think that is, that this is being driven by the Chinese government?
Well, I mean, to me, I'm not. I don't have direct access, obviously, to the things that the company is saying to the Chinese government, if indeed those talks are happening. But I would say the most likely thing. I mean, I think there is. There are interests at stake, including by Jingye. But they may not be quite as sinister as we're drawing the attention of. I mean, China is massively overproducing steel, and that is one of the issues underlying the tariff war. That, as with many other things, but particularly steel, China has massively overinvested in terms of producing steel for its own market. So it definitely needs export markets to get rid of that surplus steel that it's producing. Tariffs are going up everywhere, as we've seen, particularly in America, which is China's one of China's biggest individual trade partner. So if you shut down a steelworks in Britain, then you've got a ready market for your steel. So there's an economic interest there. That is definitely the case. And Jingye, as a sort of second-tier steel manufacturer that wants to stay relevant in a market where no one is making any profits because there's so much oversupply. If it can replace Scunthorpe's markets with its own steel, then that's good for it. So there's definitely an economic interest there.
And we heard from Oliver Gill, who suggested that actually the company may well have flagged this intention in its own report as long ago as a year. So, I mean, it may well have been out there in plain sight. You mentioned tariffs, Richard. What is the latest there? What do we think there might be in terms of resolution between China and the US, if any?
I mean, your guess is as good as mine as to what's going to happen not only this week but in the next few hours. Exemption of electronic products, including iPhones and so on, last Friday night caught everyone by surprise. It's kind of baffling if you look at if you're one of the people who tries to make out that President Trump has some secret strategy. That is kind of baffling because, iPhones is one of the things he does want to be made in America. I mean, I don't think there's any huge, great demand to transplant the sweatshops of southern China into, back into Arkansas to provide jobs. I think, what Trump wants is those high-end jobs back in America and highly profitable firms like Apple to start building iPhone factories in China. So, suddenly saying, we're not going to do tariffs on iPhones, but we are still on textiles doesn't make a lot of sense. So that was billed as by some of Trump's advisors as holding out a hand to China, realizing that they'd maybe pushed China too far and that it couldn't come and ask for a deal for without losing face. So maybe that is a way back in, but China's being pretty hard-lined at the moment. It hasn't shown any sign of responding to that, partly because the policy is so unpredictable that it doesn't really know what to say.
And finally, I mean, all of this comes against the backdrop of Xi Jinping's tour of Southeast Asia. He's in Vietnam today. What is he hoping to achieve with that tour?
Yeah, so I think it's very clear. I mean, it's stated openly, as you say, in plain sight, what China wants to say to potential allies, or maybe allies is the wrong term, but maybe what it wants to say to other countries, that are now up in the air in terms of their relationship with America is, you don't have to make any decisions now. You don't actually have to say, right now we're with China or with America. You can just plod along and you will realize that we are the stable partner. ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, China overtook it as its largest collective trading partner back 15 years ago. It has imports from China. It sells its produce, its agricultural produce to China. It's part of these international supply chains. Vietnam makes iPhones. Cambodia makes huge amounts of textiles for the American and European market for which it uses imported Chinese cloth. These supply chains are very important to these countries' growth. At the moment, they include China. We don't know whether they'll carry on including America. A lot of these countries had moved much more closely towards America, like Vietnam, because they were nervous of this giant, slightly bullying neighbor on their borders. But America's saying, well, we don't want you as friends, particularly. We're going to slap the same tariffs on you as we are on everybody else. So President Xi is there saying, look at me, I say the same thing year in, year out. I never change.
A really interesting perspective. Richard, thank you very much. That is Richard Spencer, the China correspondent at The Times.